Arjun versus Magnus is about to begin. A handshake and Arjun opens with d4. The knight comes out to f6, c4. Magnus goes for the King's Indian or the Grunfeld? He goes for the King's Indian. Wow, this is going to be super exciting. Arjun plays his bishop to e2. Magnus pauses a bit. Castles is the normal move here. But what is on his mind? He goes e5. Wow, he plays his pawn to e5 and Arjun takes it. Pawn takes and goes into an endgame. Doesn't he know that it's not a great idea to play endgames against Magnus? Well, Arjun has played this position before and has played knight f3 here against Muradli Muhammad. But here he's come prepared. He pushes his pawn to f4 and this is the best move according to the engine. Now, if Magnus takes here, then after bishop f4, long castle and e5 would be too strong. And so he plays bishop e6. If you take this pawn, knight d7 followed by knight c6, you can win back the pawn. So knight f3, Magnus brings his knight out to c6. The position is interesting. And it remains to be seen how Arjun progresses here. He shot castles. The main aim here is to take advantage of Black's king, which is in the center, because otherwise Black's position looks completely fine. He has all his pieces developed. Also, the d4 square is weak, so the knight could jump in there at the right moment. Magnus now trying to figure out what exactly should he be doing. As we just mentioned, e takes f4 is not a great idea because of bishop f4. He goes king c8, he tucks his king to the side, maybe to bring his rook to the center. Still, the rook on a8, it's not so easy to get him into play. f5, a pawn sacrifice by Arjun, because after take, pawn takes, which has happened, if you take with the bishop, there is knight takes e5. If you take the knight, I take your bishop, and that is why this is a good move. So Magnus might do well not to take the pawn and move back. And in such positions, Magnus generally is able to outplay his opponents because there are so many themes and ideas here. Arjun has to play energetically. He has to keep fighting ideas. Let's see how he goes here. Knight g5, the first energetic move, attacking the f7 pawn. Magnus defends it. Maybe knight d5, trying to get out this blockading knight and then push the pawn to f6 if you can. Well, Arjun is taking his time here, and rightly so. He finds bishop e3. He wants to go bishop c5, hitting the rook and then winning the f7 pawn. That could be his idea, but then Black has knight d4 in this position to block the bishop and also to plonk the knight into the center of the board. The time is 2 minutes for Arjun, 1 minute 45 seconds for Magnus Carlsen. Magnus here wants to be sure. He goes knight d4. Arjun puts his bishop on d3, defending the f5 pawn even further. And now Magnus kicks the knight. He comes back to e4. Now, if you take here, then after bishop e4, white is better. But there is a small window because the bishop is blocked that you can win the pawn. And the point here is that if I take knight f6, there is knight takes e3 because my bishop is hanging. So will Magnus actually take this pawn? Because it seems that it's possible to take it, but he could also take it with the bishop. That's also possible because after bishop d4, you have bishop e4. Knight e4, knight e4. It's all crazy complications here, and white is still slightly better. But for the time being, Magnus is calculating everything. He takes on f5. And now he's attacking here, but the best move is bishop c5, hitting the rook. And then threatening knight f6 followed by bishop f5. He finds it. Arjun finds it. Magnus takes on e4. And Arjun can take on e4, but he takes on f8. A good move. Magnus takes back because his bishop was hanging. And now Arjun can take on e4 with the bishop or with the knight. He's an exchange up. But he's a pawn down in return there. So knight e4. And bishop e6 played. The position looks very good for Arjun Erigaisi. But against Magnus, you cannot rest in such positions. And Arjun trying to play his knight. Maybe he can bring his rook into the game. Rook A, E1. Black might be aiming to play C6, King C7 and getting the rook in. Just have to take care that black does not consolidate. And I think Arjun taking time here makes sense because now he's getting grips with the new position that is on the board. The new material balance. Where are the weaknesses and brings the rook. Good move. Rook A, E1. Magnus jumps in with the knight to D4. And now Arjun goes knight F6. Another classy move. The H6 pawn is a weakness and maybe you want to go after it at some point. Also the E5 pawn is hanging for the time being. So bishop D6 played. King H1. So that later on if I play C5, bishop C5, there are no discovered checks. And now the E5 pawn, the C5 is definitely a threat to attack the E5 pawn. Magnus goes C5 to block the C pawn. B3 played. King comes up. He puts his bishop on E4. Maybe he wants to put his bishop on D5. The knight could also jump into D5 now. I like how Arjun is doing this step by step. Magnus tries to create play on the queen side with 17 seconds. He pushes his pawn to A5. Arjun comes forward to trade pieces. When you're ahead in material, trade. That's the good idea. He takes, pawn takes. Now Arjun has an important decision to make because he's lost a pawn, but he plays rook F6. I love this move. The reason is that now he takes on H6. And against Magnus, many people, when they have a better position, they get defensive. But here, Arjun is definitely making use of his trump cards. He goes H4. He sees there's a passer. He pushes it. And now Magnus is almost lost, but how does he create play? Arjun keeps pushing his pawn. He needs to create a C passer. That's why he goes B5. And Arjun now, he takes on B5. He was going to move his rook. And Magnus goes forward. He's trying to be tricky there. Pawn to B6, pushes his pawn. Rook attacks the bishop. Bishop attacks the rook now. Pawn attacks the rook. Rook B8. And he goes knight F6 check. It's important move so that your knight was not hanging. King C6 and brings his rook to B1. This is fantastic play by Arjun, keeping his nerves and calm. The bishop now comes into D2, threatening C3, C2. Knight comes into D7. Magnus had to give up his rook, a check. And now the rook is hanging. Rook takes B7 taken. King takes C5. Arjun is 2 exchanges up, but the C pawn is dangerous. It might make him lose an entire rook, but not really. H6 pawn was too strong and Arjun manages to net the C pawn. Now he's 2 exchanges up and Magnus is completely lost. He pushes his pawn to G3, bishop E3. Again, look at this calmness, bringing his king into the game. Rook H5, trying to attack the E5 pawn. Bishop D2 and rook comes to F7. He plays his rook to F7. Knight C2 and I think the G pawn has started to roll now. G5. Check here, king moves to H3 and Magnus Carlsen has no way to stop the G pawn. Arjun has been flawless. Magnus gives up. What a win by Arjun. Not even for one move did he let his advantage